This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Last month, I told you all about how I want to collect and paint every single Star Wars Shatterpoint figure before Wave 2 releases in July. This month, I'm going to tell you why I failed at that goal, why I ended up with duplicates of every Wave 2 set, as well as showing you the painting I did manage to get done on my Shatterpoint figures over the past month. So basically, I just really underestimated how much time moving would take. As you can see, we are now in a brand new studio space. I just did a whole video about that, link in the description. But because I've been spending all of my time moving, I actually haven't had as much time to paint Star Wars Shatterpoint figures as I would have liked. The terrain is basically still untouched since you've last seen it, assembled but unpainted, and the figures themselves I managed to put about 20 hours of painting work into. So without further ado, let me show you what I got done in my first 2 months of painting Star Wars Shatterpoint. Week 1. For the first week of June, you basically already saw what I got up to. I assembled a bunch of the figures, primed everything, painted battle droids and clones. Once again, link down in the description if you want to get caught up on that. Week 2. For the second week of June, I continued to paint all the clones in my spare time. However, most of my actual working hours went towards doing my taxes that week. Not very exciting. If you're curious, I managed to spend about 3 or 4 hours continuing to work on the clones that week, and I basically just used the same techniques that I used in the first video. Week 3. During the third week of June, I actually had a little bit of free time to do some painting. So I got started painting some of the more fun characters, starting with Maul. Not Darth Maul, this is Lord Maul, representing his appearance as a crime boss during the events of Clone Wars Season 7, which you should totally watch if you haven't already. Even if you haven't watched any of the rest of Clone Wars, these 4 episodes are a great little finale and an excellent companion piece to Revenge of the Sith. I could go on, but this is a video about painting, so I'll try to keep the lore to a minimum. To paint Maul, I heavily referenced his appearance in Season 7 of the Clone Wars, and for those of you just tuning in, my goal here is to paint all of these figures in that sketchy Clone Wars style that, in retrospect, I think is one of the most iconic things about the series. So that's what I attempted to do here. I kept it pretty simple, using basic acrylics to paint almost everything, and spent more time than I probably should have gazing at pictures of Maul's face, trying to get the tattoos right. Luckily, AMG have sculpted on a lot of the tattoos to make this a little bit easier, but it still took me a little while to get the kind of results that I wanted. For the horns, I base coated them in white, but to give them more of a bone look, I finally got a chance to try out the production copy of Howling Sand, one of the speed paint colors I helped design with the Army Painter. And while I may be a bit biased, I think it worked pretty well for this. Beyond this, I don't think there was too much special about how I painted Maul. I used traditional layering techniques, and after 2 hours of painting him, I left him at this point to finish up later with the airbrush. The following day, I spent another 2 hours painting the second Dathomirian that comes with the core set, Asajj Ventress. And if you're not familiar with Ventress, she's one of those characters who hasn't appeared in live action yet, and is more or less a animation exclusive character. She has this real pale vampiric sort of skin tone, so to mix things up, I thought I would use some Vallejo Express color Deep Purple to start off her skin tone. I highlighted this up using a warm white color, and it was a lot of fun to paint both her skin and her eyes. For the rest of Ventress, I pretty much gave her the same treatment as Maul, using basic layering techniques and then highlighting these layers up in that sketchy Clone Wars style, heavily referencing her appearance in the show and in concept art. After 2 hours of effort, this is what I was able to achieve. And once again, I left her base and lightsabers to finish up with the airbrush later. The next day, I moved on to another Separatist character, the super tactical droid, Kalani. Kalani has 2 main appearances in animated Star Wars content, the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, so I tried to reference both of these appearances equally when painting him. I started out by giving the majority of the figure a thinned down coat of warm black paint. I really like using this color as a base coat for non-metallic metals that have a more warm tone, and since a lot of Kalani is basically just raw metal, I thought this would be a pretty good starting point. After this, I once again highlighted things up using standard acrylics, aiming for a non-metallic metal style on the raw metal, and using various shades of green to paint the green parts of the metal. I painted his eyes orange and once again left the rest of the stuff to do with the airbrush. The following day, I started painting Anakin and Obi-Wan. I gave them both the same deep dark red for the base tone of their skin, and then used a tan/khaki color for Anakin's base skin tone, but making sure to leave lots of dark red undertones in the recesses. For Obi-Wan, I wanted to vary his skin tone slightly from Anakin's, so I added just a tiny bit of this goldenrod color into the tan/khaki base tone color to achieve a slightly more golden skin tone, which seemed about right after referencing shots of both Anakin and Obi-Wan standing next to each other in the TV show. I used this same color to base coat his hair and beard as well, and then messed around quite a lot with his face until I finally managed to get some eyes painted onto him and make him look like the character that he's supposed to be. I then painted his white armor using the same techniques that I used for the clone troopers, painted his under armor using a warm black, and for his main robes, I once again decided to try out Howling Sand, this time over a much larger surface so I could see what it looks like. And I have to say, I really like the result. I designed this color to be a really subtle pastel version of off-white, and I think it works really well for that purpose here. I really like how it tints the color of his robes while still showing through all the subtle colors and undershading underneath. Overall, Howling Sand is one of my favorite colors in the Speedpaint 2.0 range, and I had a lot of fun designing it. Almost as much fun as I've been having designing my website using this video's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one website and hosting platform that I've been using for a bit over a decade now for all of my website needs. You just pick a template that looks good to you, add in any extra pages or features you might like, and then customize things to your heart's content using their incredibly intuitive drag and drop grid system. No coding or technical knowledge required. I've been using my current Squarespace website for a little bit over a year now to house galleries of my painted miniatures and all of my painting reference documents, like this one where I list out all of the colors used on my Star Wars Rebel Hoth army, or this one, where I list out all of the products used to design my new studio space. So if you'd like to build a website, why not check out squarespace.com today for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/DanaHowell for 10% off your very first purchase of a website or domain. The next day, I started working on the Magna Guards, using a combination of techniques that I used on Kalani and Obi-Wan. Non-metallic metals for the body, layering up from a warm black to a mixture of warm and cool whites, as well as Howling Sand with some warm white highlights for the cloaks. Moving on, the next day I started painting Bo-Katan and her two associates, and while I'm well aware that these two are supposed to represent the two Clan Kryze Mandos that back Bo up when she's fighting Gar Saxon at the Siege of Mandalore in Clone Wars Season 7, I thought it would be way more fun to paint these two up to match the color schemes of Cosca Reeves and Axe Woves, so that I can play out my elaborate Mandalorian fan fictions on the tabletop. And to match this, I figured I might as well paint Bo-Katan to be an amalgam of her various outfits from all of her various live action and animation appearances, so that I could use her, Cosca, and Axe in a variety of eras, all the way from the Clone Wars to the New Republic era. It's a totally normal thing to do. As for painting techniques, I didn't do too much special here, as I didn't make too much progress on these past the figuring out what color each part should be and giving it a base coat. And with this, that concludes my 3rd week of painting Star Wars Shatterpoint. Week 4. I spent most of week 4 painting Gloomhaven minis and making a video about Gloomhaven. However, I did get a little bit of time to work on Star Wars miniatures. On Thursday, I spent an hour getting started on Jango Fett, and I used a more blue-gray color for his clothing than I used for the other blue Mandos to help him stand out as his own unique character. And I used a similar non-metallic metal style on his armor that I used on the Magna Guards. After this, the final time that I got any painting time before the move was on Saturday, where I was able to spend 3 full hours painting. One of those hours was spent continuing to work on Jango, Bo, and the rest of the Mandalorians, but I reserved 2 hours that night to paint Ahsoka as a treat. I've been looking forward to painting this model for a while, as I really like Ahsoka. I've grown attached to her over the years, and I've never painted a model of her before. This model represents her in her iconic outfit from the Siege of Mandalore in Season 7 of the Clone Wars, and it even includes some Mandalorian-style geometric patterning to reflect her time spent with Bo-Katan. I painted Ahsoka using pretty traditional techniques, and this model, I have to say, was an absolute joy to paint. Like the other models, I left her lightsabers and base to do with the airbrush later, and that concludes all of my Star Wars painting that I was able to do before the move. Week 5. The following 10 days was a chaotic mess where I was just trying to get everything packed up and ready to go before the move. The following week after the move, I spent setting up this new studio, as you've seen, and I did manage to get a little bit of painting done in this time. I think I figured out how I want to paint the bases before I add the airbrush accents, but I really didn't get that much done. I've pretty much been focused on just unpacking and getting set up in this new space. So that's pretty much it. From my records, I've spent about 20 hours painting Star Wars Shatterpoint over the past 7 weeks, or roughly 3 hours of painting per week. It's not as much painting as I was hoping to do, but to be fair, I had a lot of other stuff going on, and honestly, I think it's kind of impressive I was even able to get this much done on these figures. For the month of August, I'm hoping to set a more reasonable goal and just attempt to double my previous progress, which I don't think should be too difficult as I don't have a lot else going on out here. So for those of you counting, my goal is to do about 5 hours of painting per week on Star Wars stuff, or about 21.5 hours in the month of August. Given that I've been spending an average of about 2 hours per figure, I feel like this goal should hopefully get me through all 24 or 26 figures that were released, I forget the exact amount, and maybe even allow me to get started on some of the Wave 2 figures that were released in July. And speaking of the Wave 2 figures that were released in July, so yes, as you can see, we have 2 of everything, and it's a funny story as to how this happened. So as you may know, the General Grievous pack was delayed, and a lot of the fans of this game knew that ahead of time. This was supposed to come out with these sets, but it was supposed to be delayed. So I contacted my friendly local game store to ask them if they could send me everything else from the pre-order so that I could stay on top of my painting schedule. This was back when I thought I would actually have these things painted in time, and they were super accommodating. So huge thank you to 401 Games for sending me all this stuff ahead of time and holding on to my, I guess my second Grievous for my next order. I put a link down in the description if you're a Canadian and you're looking for a nice, reliable store to order all of your miniatures and other sorts of hobby stuff from. So yeah, thank you to 401 Games. But how did I get a second copy of everything? Well, a few days before the release date, I actually got a package in the mail from Atomic Mass Games, who, if you're not aware, is the creator of this game. And enclosed was a thank you note saying thank you for promoting the game with my first vlog. So that's cool. Thank you so much to Atomic Mass Games for sending me a free copy of all of Wave 2. And I guess this has something to do with the link down in the description they gave me. It's not an affiliate link, but it's it's a link that you as the viewer can click on to let them know that you heard about this game from me. So long story short, enough of you clicked on that link that they thought it was worth sending me all of Wave 2. So if you want me to keep getting free stuff from Atomic Mass Games, go down in the description and click on that link for me if you want. But what are we going to do with the second copy of everything? I'm thinking maybe we raffle it off for charity or something. I don't really have a use for 2 copies of the same character. Let me know down in the description what you think I should do with the second copy of everything. So that is pretty much it. Thank you for watching my second vlog for Star Wars Shatterpoint. I'm sorry I didn't achieve more in this time, but you keep watching these, I'm happy to keep making more Star Wars Shatterpoint vlogs, and hopefully in the next one, I'll actually finish one of the figures. So thank you as always for watching. Thank you to all of our lovely patrons for supporting the channel, and I will see you in the next video.